Hey there, hey wellness warriors. If we've got any ITP warriors joining us, welcome for today. Tomorrow is Rare Disease Awareness Day, and so I just wanted to take today to just share a little bit more of my story. I'm going to go ahead and put my Brave oil on because when I talk about my story, I actually do have a lot of feelings that come up about that. I'm really open about my rare disease story and what has helped me, how I'm in remission. Gosh, I don't even have any notes, so if I feel a little bit scattered, my apologies. But yes, tomorrow is Rare Disease Awareness Day, and the disease I was diagnosed with 21 years ago is called ITP, idiopathic thrombocytopenia purpura. And I've connected with a lot of people online. If you're one of my fellow warriors, I'm just so glad that we've gotten connected. And I share, bits and pieces of my story, but I don't always take the opportunity to kind of share like the medium long version. I'm going to try to keep this a little bit short, but I'm going to share a little bit more than I usually do. So it was June 28th. 2003, so it'll be 21 years ago this summer. I wake up on a Saturday morning out of the blue, didn't know anything was wrong with me, and I had blood blisters on my gums, like little black spots, and I had little red rashy looking spots all over my legs. I thought it was a rash. I didn't know it was petechia. And I had a bruise on my shoulder, like an indent bruise from where I carried my beach bag because I had been to the beach the day before. My beach bag was not heavy. All I had was a towel and a paperback book. But I had a bruise like the size of my beach bag purse. And so I wake up on a Saturday and I'm going I don't know what is going on. I knew something was wrong. So I went to an urgent care. Again, it was the weekend. That was my only option. Went to an urgent care and I thought I was having an allergic reaction because the petechia looked like a rash. So they ask you all the allergic reaction questions, right? Are you itching? Are you having trouble breathing? Or do you have any actual allergies? And I didn't. And so they ran some blood work and they told me don't go anywhere. They were running this blood work stat, which again, urgent care on a weekend. Who does that? So they make me wait and wait and wait for the blood work to come back. And they came into the room and explained to me that, when you run a CBC on your blood work and they check, red cells, white cells, platelets, your platelet count should be between 150 and 400. That's normal. Mine was 2. So their next question to me was, you're going to the hospital. Do you have a ride or do you need, ambulance transport? And my husband at the time, we weren't even married yet. He was my boyfriend. So he's all, no, I can drive her. I had never been to the hospital before. I only knew what I had seen on TV. So I was like, oh, should I go home and, pack a bag or get pajamas or whatever? They're like, no, you need to go now. And don't even go in through the emergency room because we don't want you to have to wait again. We called and we had you admitted. Again, that never happens. Usually if an urgent care can't help you, they just excuse you and they send you to the emergency room. They called and had me admitted, and I spent the next 5 days in the hospital being pumped full of everything the hematologist could throw at me. So, they had the hematologist come in and see me, and my hematologist ended up being my doctor for the next 15 years while I still lived in California. So, prednisone, right? Now, my ITP warriors are going to start checking the boxes, right? They started me on prednisone. Then they gave me Winrow. Then they gave me a dose of chemotherapy called vincristine, which knocked me on my butt. Then, a platelet transfusion. I had that too. And days went by while they monitored my counts. And on about the 4th or 5th day, they had, through pharmaceuticals, gotten my count up to 100 something. And so they released me from the hospital. And so for the next 2 years, right, I was seeing my hematologist every week, sometimes twice a week, because if I saw him at the beginning of the week and my counts were too low, he would say, I want to see you again on Friday before the weekend. I was on prednisone the entire time, usually somewhere between 20 and 40 milligrams. We tried other medications. I tried IV immune globulin. You know, certain things like that would help for a period of time, like 3 to 4 weeks. My counts would go back down. I did a course of Rituxan, which is kind of like a chemotherapy without drastically terrible side effects, but I had no response to that. My husband and I had gotten married. Oh, before we got married, actually, we knew that we were going to want to start a family. And so that was part of my scope of how do we get this under control so that I can have a healthy pregnancy. And, you know, at the time, and I know doctors still do, they talk about splenectomy, taking your spleen out. The theory behind that is if the platelets are being filtered through the spleen, if we take the spleen out, maybe the platelets will stay in your body. They don't tell you, they don't know whether it's the spleen or the liver unless they take out the spleen and it doesn't work. That's actually what ended up happening. But I made that decision based on like meeting with the chief of hematology down at Scripps La Jolla, who basically said, if you have your spleen out and it works, you could be medication free, you could be in full remission and be able to enjoy a healthy pregnancy. So I kind of made that decision on that, you know, set of circumstances. So had my spleen out, it did not work. I stayed on prednisone. And so the question that I get asked all the time is then how did you end up in remission when every single Western medication pretty much failed me? I couldn't stay on prednisone long term. It's not something you can be on for an extremely long time. So what did I do? How is it that I stand before you today, like fully healed? And, you know, after my spleen came out, my hematologist's next course of treatment was going to be a chemotherapy cocktail of 3 chemotherapies, one being the Rituxan that already didn't work, but they were thinking that if they pair that with something, it might work. Vincristine, which was the one that knocked me on my behind the year before, and something called Cytoxan, which already the name just made me cringe. And so that was their next course of treatment, is chemo cocktail, knock out your immune system, like rebooting a computer. So my husband at the time, well, he's still my husband, but at the time, my husband was the relentless researcher. And that's why I am that today. He taught me to be the relentless researcher. He did all the research on people who actually die from ITP. And again, that's not something we like to talk about, but statistically, the people that don't survive are not the people that have extremely low platelets. They're the people who have no spleen and take hordes of chemotherapy and lose their immune system. They end up succumbing to opportunistic infections. And so we went, no, right? He kind of, my husband's not a big put your foot down kind of person, but he was like, no, it's time to look at other possibilities. And so we turned to alternative treatments. And at the time, again, 21 years ago, there were no Facebook groups. There weren't even Yahoo groups at the time, if you remember Yahoo groups. But the Platelet Disorder Support Association had a bulletin board where people talked and posted messages to each other. And that's where we got the support of our fellow ITP warriors. And people were talking about a protocol of Chinese herbs that were designed by traditional Chinese medicine doctors who also knew Western medicine. And that was kind of how I found out about them. And I gave them a call and I decided to try their herbal regimen. And long story short, it took a long time because of how drastic my case of ITP was. Every time my doctor would cut my dose of prednisone, my counts would tank down to like single digits. So if I cut my prednisone from 20 to 10 to 5, my counts would go down, 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 tank. Then I'm down to 3, a count of 3 again. It was like we just could not stabilize that. So the herbs took, within the first few months, I took them for months and my counts didn't budge. It was still roller coaster. So if you're right there, if you're in that spot, don't get discouraged. The first thing that we noticed was that I stopped having symptoms when my counts would go low. So when my count went down to 3 again, I wasn't bleeding and bruising and hemorrhaging. And my doctor actually, instead of admitting me into the hospital at one point, he let me go home with a bump in my prednisone and an order to go get some IVIG. He really helped me manage that and balance he supported alternative treatments, but I had to stay on the prednisone to stay safe for a period of time. And after about a year on the Chinese herbs, again, a lot of people don't want to hang in there. A lot of people try it and say it didn't work, my counts didn't go up. This was my last ditch. I didn't have any other options. So I waited and waited and waited. And after about a year, the first time my doctor said, let's try cutting your prednisone dose. And I went in for a blood count and my platelet count went up. It was working. It was incredible. Like I took notes. If anybody ever wants to, be nerdy with me and go like, what was your count? What did you do? Blah, blah, blah. I actually took notes and kept copies of my CDCs with the doctor's orders and how much prednisone and what I did with the herbs and stuff so that I could track. But the first time we cut the prednisone and my count went up, because every single time before that, my count would drop. And then it continued to go up. After that, it didn't really roller coaster. It stabilized and continued to go up. And by the time it got over 200, it took a long time. I never relapsed and I stayed in remission. And so when a lot of people ask me, what did you do to get in remission? And I say, I took these Chinese herbs, but I'm doing a disservice if I stop my story there, because even though the Chinese herbal supplements got my platelet count safe, we could use the word normal. There's no cure for ITP. I don't say I'm cured. I do say I'm healed. Okay, I know we can argue semantics. But even though I was in remission, technically, with my platelet count, I wasn't what I would consider healthy because I hadn't changed anything else about my lifestyle and my immune system was still thrashed. I still got sick every single time something went around. And by then I had kids in school and I was a classroom teacher. And so every germ that went around, I caught it. So colds and flu and multiple things like every year, usually like bronchitis or something at least once a year. And so I wasn't really what I would consider healthy, even though my platelets were in the normal range. I wasn't having any ITP symptoms. I was checking in with my hematologist, whenever he just wanted to check a blood count. But it wasn't until a few more years later that my husband and I were considering other health things for our family. And we were looking at just different, nutritional changes and things we could do with our diet. And we decided to go gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, and kind of follow like a nutritional plan for our family. And, it was just something that we had looked at and thought that it was going to be, helpful for us and our son and whatever. I wasn't even thinking for myself. I did not think that I needed to change my nutrition, right? I thought everything was fine. So we go ahead. We do this thing. We cut out gluten, dairy, sugar, corn, soy. It came, if anybody's following that, it's called The Omni Diet by Tana Amen. Love it. It's still my nutrition Bible. But what ended up happening when I did that, all of a sudden I stopped feeling like I was always feeling icky and run down. I would always feel, whether I was actually sick or not, with a cold or a flu, I always felt like I was getting something. Like I was fighting a cold or a flu, or I had this low grade fever and I just felt icky, like my body's fighting something, or I just don't feel well. When I changed my diet, that changed. And I said to my husband, like months later, I was like, hey, I haven't had one of those weird low grade achy fever things in a long time. And he went, no, you haven't complained about that in a long time. Come to find out through, like eliminating things and adding things back into my diet, I'm sensitive to gluten. Who knew? When I eat gluten, I get a fever and flu symptoms. It's inflammation. I had no idea that my body was dealing with systemic chronic inflammation. What if that was exacerbating or triggering my ITP? What if that was a root cause? What if that was keeping me sick even when I was still taking all those medications and Chinese herbs, and that's why it took so long to, to overcome that? Who knows, right? We can't do the hindsight thing and really be able to put the pieces together. But once I changed my nutrition and I cut out gluten and I cut out dairy and I cut that stuff out, the inflammation causing foods, all of a sudden physically I felt better. I felt better. I was still getting a lot of colds and flus and stuff, but then fast forward, right? Then I start to learn about, essential oils can be good for your health, and this oil can do this, and this oil can support your immune system, and this oil can do that. And I introduced essential oils into my health routine, and I used an oil for anything that I could find an oil for, right? I put on oils to help me with my confidence and help me with emotional support. I use oils to support immune system. I use oils for, relaxing and sleeping at night. And I found oils to help with everything that I could swap out, different things that had, I don't want to start naming products. I'm not, FDA compliance doesn't allow me to do that, but things that have ingredients that we might not like, I started switching. And it was the first fall and winter season that I overcame that without getting a bug, that I went, wow, like something shifted in my immune system and in my health when I started using oils for like basically everything I could get my hands on. And so it's been this progression. Then I started looking at cleaning products and personal care products and reading ingredients in that. Stuff that harms our health, stuff with ingredients that hurts our immune system, hurts our endocrine system, causes our hormones to get all wonky. And I really started looking at, what am I putting in my body, like food-wise and preservative-wise and whatever. What am I putting on my body? Because lotions and soaps and cleaning products and all of that soaks in a certain amount. And I started switching all of that. And so it's been this progression that I have gotten even since ITP remission. I don't think I would still be in remission if I hadn't made any of those changes, if I hadn't changed my diet, if I hadn't gotten rid of inflammation, if I hadn't started looking at ingredients of things and switching out for plant-based options for like cleaning products and getting rid of like artificial fragrances, because that's all toxic chemical stuff. If I hadn't done any of that, I can't stand here today in confidence and say, I think I would still be as healthy now, or I'd still be in remission. So when people ask me, how did I get into remission? I got my platelet count up one way, but all these other things are so important. Like I said, I would be doing a disservice if I didn't share the whole scope of that. And it's just been such an honor to come alongside other ITP warriors who, I've been there. It's so hard when you're in it, because that was me, right? I didn't know anybody that had ITP. I didn't have anybody to say, hey, look, I've been there and I know exactly how you feel. I know what prednisone does to you. I know how it feels to sit in that IV chair and have a 4-hour infusion. When we have those people that identify with us, and it really has been on my heart to be that person to reach back and hold hands and link arms and support people. And so that's really been the whole scope of my journey. That is the kind of the long version of my story. I still get my platelets checked at least once a year, if not more. They've been over 200 for 17 years now. Praise God, right? Miracles do happen. And that's really my message for rare disease anything, is I know, when we go to the doctor, I know what it feels like to feel so scared. I know what it feels like to be waiting for test results to come back and how anxiety producing that is. I know how that feels. And I know how it feels when doctors say, well, all we can do is manage symptoms. There's no cure for this. But I stand here today healed and in remission for 17 years. And so I hope that my story brings you hope, that if you're in it and if you're struggling, you can go, look, well, it can happen. Hang on to that. I know ITPers who are in remission and who are having, you know, great platelet counts, and I'm giving you a virtual hug if you are in the struggle right now, and I am definitely here for you. So if we haven't connected yet, please do reach out so that we can stay connected. And if anything I've said is helpful, or you want more information on how do I do that, where do I start with that, where do I start shifting my lifestyle, and if it seems overwhelming, remember I did baby steps, one thing at a time, because sometimes it all gets to be too much. But I am here for you, and I can help you with that. So happy, is that a happy day? Happy Rare Disease Awareness Day. If you're catching this on a replay and it's not February 29th, then that's the day. We'll remember it for next year. But God bless you.